If you've seen my previous video about a prophetic manga from Japan, then you absolutely won't want to miss this one. Because this time, a similar prophecy, made by an American seer in the year 2025, is about to send chills down your spine. And the most unsettling part is this. The prophecy claims that the year 2025 will mark a turning point in human history, a decisive moment that could shape the fate of the entire world. So what exactly is this prophecy? Let's find out in today's video. So fasten your seatbelt as we dive into today's mystery. But first, you might just change your luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. Have you ever wondered, if you had the chance to know your own future, would you choose to know it, or would you still prefer to let everything unfold naturally? That question may sound simple at first, but it's far from easy to answer. Because what would you do if what you found out turned out to be a tragedy that could not be avoided? In the early 1940s in America, there was a woman who possessed a strange and unexplainable ability. She could see events that were yet to come, sometimes far into the future. She could foresee a person's future profession, the moment a destined relationship would begin, and even the day someone would pass from this life. Her name was Jeane Dixon, a name that would later become a symbol of clairvoyance and prophecy throughout the 20th century. On January 10, 1942, inside a high-end beauty salon reserved for America's social elite, a middle-aged woman with a tense expression approached a famous actress, Carole Lombard, who at the time was at the very peak of her career. The stranger spoke in a soft but urgent tone, telling Lombard, "I know this may sound unreasonable, but in the next 6 months, please do not travel by airplane. If you do, your life will be in danger." Carole smiled, half in gratitude, half to dismiss the strange warning she had just received. She replied with calm politeness, "In just a few days, I have a flight scheduled, but don't worry, I think I'll be just fine." After that, the actress stepped away and entered the VIP lounge, giving no further thought to the warning she had just heard. Just 6 days later, on January 16, 1942, her flight would never arrive. The aircraft crashed into a mountain due to pilot error. All 22 people on board, including Carole Lombard, were killed. The woman who gave that warning wasn't some eccentric or busybody, as many might have thought. She was Jeane Dixon, one of the most influential psychics in American history, who would later go on to predict world-shaking events, from the death of a president to the rise of superpowers and even global upheavals in the years to come. In March of 1933, the United States was plunged deep into the darkness of the Great Depression. Unemployment had soared past 25%, crop prices had fallen by as much as 60%, and more than 2 million Americans had lost their homes. It was during this bleak and desperate hour that Franklin D. Roosevelt officially became the 32nd President of the United States. He stood on the inauguration platform, not with a triumphant smile, but with the resolute gaze of a man who now carried the last hopes of an entire nation on his shoulders. Roosevelt promised to rewrite the destiny of America, and through 4 consecutive terms in office, he did what no president before or after has ever achieved. But by 1944, at the age of 62, his body began to betray the iron will that had defined his presidency. His health had become a serious concern, with mounting diagnoses of high blood pressure, arteriosclerosis, and other complications. And yet, all of this had already been foretold by Jeane Dixon. On a morning in November of 1944, the phone rang inside Jeane Dixon's modest home. When she answered, there was only a short message on the other end. "The president would like to see you." And then the line went silent. Calmly, Dixon stepped into the waiting car parked just outside her door, which took her straight to the White House, a place she had visited a few years earlier during a fundraising event where she had briefly met the president. This time, as she stood face to face with him, Roosevelt didn't speak of war or national policy. Instead, he asked something deeply personal. "Can you tell me how much longer I have in this role?" Jeane Dixon did not hesitate. She answered quietly but firmly, "No more than 6 months." And just a few months later, on April 12, 1945, Franklin D. Roosevelt passed away, exactly as she had said. His successor, just as foretold in one of her earlier prophecies, was Senator Harry S. Truman, a man who, years prior, had also been told by Dixon that one day he would become President of the United States. The ability to see the future is a gift, but it is also a burden, especially for the one who carries it. For Jeane Dixon, that ability first began to manifest in her early childhood. She was born in 1904 in the state of Wisconsin, into a traditional Catholic family. From a very young age, her parents began to notice that something was different about their youngest daughter. At the age of just 5, Jeane insisted repeatedly that her mother give her an envelope with a black border. She made the same request over and over throughout the day, even as her mother declined, insisting that there was no such envelope in the house. 10 days later, a letter arrived from a distant relative. It was a funeral announcement. Jeane's grandfather had passed away. The letter was enclosed in an envelope with a black border, exactly as the little girl had described. That was the first moment her family realized that Jeane possessed an ability far beyond the ordinary. On another occasion, while her father was away on a business trip in Chicago, Jeane, then only 7 years old, suddenly turned to her mother, full of excitement. "Daddy's going to bring home a very big dog. Its fur is black and white." Her mother laughed. At the time, long-distance communication was slow, and no one in the family had ever mentioned anything about getting a dog. But just a few days later, her father returned, with a black and white dog that matched her description exactly. Then in 1911, a special opportunity presented itself. Her parents heard that an Egyptian palm reader had recently arrived in California, someone who was well known among the immigrant community for her skill in reading fate through hands. They brought Jeane to meet her. After studying the child's palm for a few moments, the woman looked up, her eyes reflecting something that words couldn't quite capture. She then told Jeane's parents, "Your daughter will be a great prophet, someone who can see across time." She then handed Jeane a small crystal ball and a piece of silk, and the moment Jeane took it in her hands, something strange happened. The little girl stood silently for a while, then suddenly looked at the woman and in a soft voice said, "Be careful with the stove. You're about to get burned." A few days later, the woman suffered a kitchen injury, just as Jeane had warned. Jeane even foresaw the future of her own older brother. While they were playing in the backyard one day, she suddenly said, "You're going to be a famous athlete one day." At the time, it sounded like a child's innocent remark. But 10 years later, her brother would be recognized as one of the greatest football players in America. Some called it a supernatural gift. Others believed she had a divine connection. But whatever it was, one thing was clear. Jeane Dixon was someone who could see the future. One of the earliest predictions that thrust Jeane Dixon into the public spotlight was her prophecy concerning Winston Churchill, who, at the time, was serving as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and widely regarded as one of the most influential statesmen of the 20th century. In 1945, during a visit to the United States, Churchill sought out Jeane Dixon. He asked her a simple question: "Will I be re-elected?" Without hesitation, she told him that he would not, that fate would take a different course, regardless of the power and prestige he currently held. Churchill's face flushed with anger. At the time, no one could imagine an outcome other than his victory. But just a few months later, that prophecy came true. Churchill lost the general election in the United Kingdom. However, the prophecy that shook America to its core was Jeane Dixon's prediction of the death of President John F. Kennedy. In 1956, in an article published in Parade magazine, she predicted that the Democratic nominee would win the 1960 presidential election, but that he would be assassinated during his first term. At the time, Kennedy had not even officially declared his candidacy, and her prediction was either forgotten or dismissed as a publicity stunt. But by 1963, after Kennedy had become president, Jeane Dixon began to have far more vivid premonitions. She saw a dark cloud hanging over the White House and a pair of black hands wiping the president's name off the plaque outside his office. And as if those images weren't chilling enough, she also saw a strange name, one consisting of 5 to 6 letters, beginning with an O, the second letter being an S, and the final letter having a hooked tail, like a fish hook. On November 22, 1963, President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. The news cast the entire nation into mourning, and just hours later, a name flashed across the television screen: Lee Harvey Oswald, the man accused of the assassination. A name that matched exactly what Jeane Dixon had described: the O, the S, and the final D, curved like a hook. People were stunned, because that prophecy had not only been accurate in outcome, it had been precise in its smallest details. From that moment on, the press began referring to her as the Seer of Washington. She was no longer just a strange woman issuing warnings that others ignored. She had become a symbol of what science could not explain. Throughout her career, Jeane Dixon didn't just predict the rise and fall of political figures or historical events. She also spoke of things that had yet to occur, events that, in her words, would not only alter a single nation, but potentially reshape the fate of all humanity. And among all the prophecies she ever made, the year 2025 was the one she mentioned again and again. In 1971, Jeane Dixon published a book titled The Call to Glory. In it, she described a vision not just of the near future, but one that reached chillingly far ahead. In the year 2020, a global war will break out, not a war of bullets and bombs like those before it, but a war of disease. When the COVID-19 pandemic erupted in 2020, many looked back on this passage with a sense of uneasy recognition. A crisis that brought the world to a halt, shuttered economies, and claimed millions of lives. Was this the apocalyptic war Dixon once warned about? And if that was only the beginning, what then awaits us in 2025, the year she claimed would bring a turning point for humankind? According to the predictions recorded in her book, My Life and Prophecies, Jeane Dixon emphasized that 2025 would mark a bloody turning point between two major powers in Asia, China and Russia. In the vision she described, the war between them wouldn't just be about politics or territorial disputes. It would be a battle for control over the destiny of the world. And in the end, she claimed, China would emerge victorious. That prophecy may sound far-fetched, especially given that we are now already several months into the year 2025, and no such conflict has erupted between those two nations. But it's worth noting that while Dixon's predictions have often been strikingly accurate in outcome, they have also shown discrepancies in who is involved. Today, the world stands on the edge of a very different kind of conflict, a tense economic standoff between the United States and China. And it raises the question, could Dixon's vision have been misread? Was she actually foreseeing this very trade war? There is no way to know for certain. Only time can reveal the answer. And yet, what makes this year all the more unsettling is that Jeane Dixon wasn't the only one who pointed to it. Back in 1999, a Japanese manga artist named Tatsuki published a graphic novel titled The Future I Saw. In it, she recorded 15 prophetic dreams. 14 of them have already come true. The final dream, the one that hasn't happened yet, fixes a specific date, July 5th, 2025. According to that dream, a disaster even greater than Japan's 3/11th earthquake will strike in the South China Sea, and a new landmass will rise from the ocean, connecting Japan with Taiwan, Hong Kong, and the Philippines. And the story doesn't end there. Also in Japan, a man claiming to be a time traveler from the year 2062 appeared on a popular internet forum. Before the devastating March 11th earthquake, he posted a warning urging residents to flee to higher ground. Then, in 2022, he returned with another chilling message. The South China Sea will not be calm. Prepare for something never before seen. In July of 2025. Is it all just coincidence? Or is it a warning the world has yet to fully grasp? Jeane Dixon once said, "Yes, there will be war, but at the same time, a person of boundless love and compassion will emerge. This person will reconnect the severed threads between humanity and lead them toward final peace. Perhaps 2025 will bring turmoil, but maybe, just maybe, in that long night, a light is waiting at the end of the road. The real fear may not lie in the disaster itself, but in our refusal to prepare for it, even after we've been warned." Throughout the long arc of history, humanity has always been haunted by one deceptively simple question: can the future be changed? Or has it already been written, leaving us to do nothing but wait for it to arrive? We may not be able to stop the earth from trembling, nor hold back a storm, nor control the movements of the deep and restless sea, but we can choose whose hand we hold when those moments come. And sometimes, just a single hand reaching out in the darkness is enough to make us feel like everything will be okay. You may not believe everything that was just told. Maybe, for you, prophecy is just a matter of faith, or nothing more than coincidence. But if you've ever heard a strange prediction, if you've ever had a dream you couldn't explain, or experienced a moment that made you feel there's something beyond ordinary logic, then share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to keep following stories as mysterious as this one, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. I'll see you in the next video.